we'll focus on how to use the For Each and For Each File in Folder activities in UiPath Studio. The For Each activity iterates through a list of items, one at a time, and executes the actions in the body of the activity. The For Each File in Folder activity is a specific type of For Each activity that's designed to loop through each file in a specified folder. Let's see it in action. As always, we encourage you to build along with this video. Okay, we've got the following business scenario. The PDF files from a given folder must be renamed so that the file name ends with the current date. For demonstration purposes, we'll solve the scenario using the two options, with a For Each and with a For Each File in Folder. We'll create a sequence that asks us what folder we want to process. Then, for each file in the folder, save the name to a variable. Next, add the current date to the value and print it in the output panel. Finally, change the name of the file. Let's start building the sequence with the For Each. Rename it and add an annotation. We'll add a Browse for Folder activity to let the user choose the folder to process. This activity opens a dialog box prompting the user to select a folder and saves the folder path to a string variable. Let's create a variable for the output, folder path. Next, we need an activity to get the files from the folder. To achieve this, let's use an Assign activity and rename it. Let's create a variable by using Ctrl+K shortcut and name it Invoices Names Array. For the value field, let's use the directory .getFiles vb.net method. Using this method, we can retrieve all of the files within a specific folder. Let's not forget to change the data type for this variable to an array of strings. Now, we want to loop through the elements of this array. So how do we do this? By using the For Each activity. This activity helps us to step through each element in the folder. We add the date to the name, log the result, and then change the name of the file in the folder. Let's have a quick look at the Properties panel. The type argument is by default Object. Furthermore, we have an input property called Max Iterations that we'll use later in the process. Let's change the current item to Invoice Name and add the Invoices Names Array variable to the In field. We notice that the type argument property automatically changed to string. Perfect! We'll rename the body of the activity and add a description. So, what's next? We'll use an Assign activity to change the names of the elements in the array and store them. We'll create a new variable of type string. Let's call it New Invoice Name. To modify the values, we'll use the Replace Now.toString vb.net methods. This expression will add the date at the end of the file name string. The method is a basic conversion from one data type to a string. Let's add a log message activity to log the new invoice name. This expression is concatenating several strings together to create a message that displays the original invoice file name and the new invoice file name, separated by the string is. The / character is used as a delimiter to separate the file name from the directory path in both cases. And finally, let's rename the file by using the Move File activity. This activity moves a file from one specified location to another, using the From and To options. In our case, the destination path is a different file name. Let's take a moment to review our progress before we run the workflow. We have asked the user to select the folder that contains the files, and we've successfully retrieved the files inside the folder. For each file, we've created a new name and after renamed the files. Everything looks good. Let's run the workflow. We'll select the folder, All Invoices. Great, let's check the folder in the Project panel. Each invoice has been renamed with the current date appended. There's one more thing to check here. Remember the max iterations property from earlier? Here's how it works. Let's set it to 2. And run the workflow again. OK, let's check again the All Invoices folder. We notice that the ForEach activity has been executed only twice, as indicated by the fact that only the first 2 invoices were renamed. Great! Let's move on to the ForEach file in folder activity and solve the same scenario. We'll collapse this first sequence, add a new one, rename it, and provide a description. Before running the second sequence, we must restore the invoices to their original names. OK, we'll build a similar structure to the previous one. We can use the new invoice name variable, but we need to make it accessible from any sequence. Next, we'll reuse the Browse for All Invoices folder activity in our new sequence. Let's not forget to disable the previous sequence so that it won't run when we run the entire project. Now, let's add the ForEach file in folder activity and configure it. The Filter property filters the files in the specified folder by extension, in our case, .pdf. In the Folder property, we'll use the folder path variable that we already have. Let's change the current file to invoice name. We'll use an assign activity to rename the invoice files, as we did previously. In the To input field, we'll specify the destination file path using our new invoice name variable. The resulting expression will rename the PDF files with a new name that includes the current date and time, while keeping the original file extension. Next, let's add a log message activity to log the new invoice name. Configure it. And finally, let's rename the file by using the Move File activity. We'll enter invoice name.fullname into the path input field and specify the new file name using our new invoice name variable in the destination input field. Let's quickly recap and run our workflow. To retrieve the files, we ask the user to select the folder that contains the files. And then we're using for each file in folder activity to rename all of the files. OK, click Run. Select the folder again, and let's check it. Perfect! All of the invoices have the new name with the current date. Let's sum it up. The for each activity can work with any collection, such as an array, a list, or a dictionary. It has a max iterations property that specifies the maximum number of iterations to perform. The for each file in folder activity, on the other hand, is specifically designed to work with files in a folder. It iterates through each file in a specified folder and performs an action on each file. While the for each activity is more versatile regarding the type of collections that it can work with, the for each file in folder activity is more convenient when working with files. Furthermore, the for each file in folder activity is shorter and easier to set up, as it requires only a folder path as input, whereas the for each activity requires a collection to be explicitly defined.